The most common type of corporation is called a C corporation, but much like partnerships, there are multiple types of corporations that businesses can designate themselves as. So when we talk about Nike, Target, Tesla, Volkswagen, all of these large companies that sell stock, those are all C corporations. So we talked about the main pro is selling stock provides us with cash that we can use in our business. A con is double taxation. Another con we also talked about is an agency problem where our shareholders want us to do one thing, but the CEO and the board of directors and the management of the company are doing something else, and then there's a disagreement between the two groups. Another type of corporation is an S corporation. So an S corp is not taxed on profits. All profits and losses are passed on to the shareholders. This, of course, it depends on what state you are in. It depends on the tax bracket that you're looking at. So we have, if you make above a certain limit, you don't qualify to be an S corporation. So then we have all of these different things that a company has to do in order to qualify for S Corp status, which avoids the double taxation. And you can see this is similar to a partnership because the profits, instead of being kept by the company, are passed on to all of the stockholders. Instead of partners, they're stockholders. So in order to be an S corporation, they have to be domestic. They cannot have locations in other countries. It has to be a completely US based corporation. They have only allowable shareholders, so the shareholders have to be individuals, not other companies, because companies can buy shares or can buy partial ownership. They cannot have more than 100 shareholders. We have only one class of stock. And like I said, we're not going to get really deep into types of stock or different things like that. Some companies have more than one type of stock. It's not that common, but there are companies. Google, for example, has different types of stock or different classes of stock. So they have one stock that can only be purchased by the public. So it's out on the public market and anyone can buy it. And then they have another type of stock that can only be purchased by employees of Google. And then they have a third type of stock that was their initial investors. Okay, that's not common for companies. Most companies only have one class of stock. Okay. And then certain types of institutions can't be an S corporation. So they're not qualified as being an S corporation, such as an insurance company would have to take C Corp status if they wanted to be a corporation. They could not be an S Corp. A B corporation, this is a corporation that is similar to a nonprofit. A nonprofit entity uses all of the money they make for the benefit of their community or their activity. Their goal is not to make money. So for a nonprofit, they're going to reinvest everything in the company. A B corporation does want to make a profit, but they are serving a public benefit. So it's a little bit different as a nonprofit. The similarity is that they're providing a public benefit like a nonprofit organization does, but a B corporation wants to earn profit. Okay. A close corporation is a smaller corporation. They have that anyone can own stock if there is stock available. Okay. The stocks are owned by people that are closely related to the business. Stockholders in close corporations benefit from liability protection while also they don't have the same reporting requirements. Sometimes you might hear about a close corporation being a publicly or a privately held business. So privately held businesses like Hobby Lobby will have stock that's only available to certain people, and they're a very large multinational company, but they're privately held in that only certain people are allowed to own stock in their business. They do not sell on the stock market where the public can buy shares. This also gives them where they don't have to have a board of directors. They don't have to, their shareholders all share their same interests. So a close corporation you might also hear as a privately held corporation because it's not being sold to the public. And some corporations start as close corporations and then evolve into C corporations because they've decided to go public, which is what it's called when a corporation decides to start selling stock to the general public for the first time. Okay, and then a nonprofit organization which works in charity, education, religion, literature, science. They exist to serve the common good. They do not have to pay taxes. All money is reinvested into the organization. Almost all colleges are nonprofit organizations. Most charities that you think of are going to fall under this. United Way, Goodwill is a nonprofit organization. Most churches are registered as nonprofits. Most K through 12 schools are actually registered as nonprofit organizations. Okay, when we look at what is the breakdown of businesses, so remember when I said in an earlier video that the single most common business type is a sole proprietorship. So you'll see here that 73% of the registered businesses in the United States are single owner sole proprietorships. So it's the single most common where C corporations are only 5.6%. The reason that you hear so much about corporations, though, is because they are extremely large companies making very large amounts of profit. So even though they're only 5% of companies, it's the companies that we're most familiar with. Generally, you only know the sole proprietorships that are within your own hometown or other towns you visit. Individual businesses that you frequent or have become fond of. It would be impossible to know what all of the millions of different sole proprietorships exist in the United States. Okay. When we talk about large private businesses, of course I have this link here so we can look what are the largest private companies. So that's where we're running into like this S corporations where they're privately held or close corporations and they do not sell stock to the public. But they make large amounts of money and most people think of them as corporations, but they're really not. So I'm going to bring this list over here that I just brought up where you can see things like New Balance. You might all have heard of New Balance shoes. So New Balance does not sell stock to the public. They are considered a privately held corporation. But you can look at the list here. You can see that Panda which has a restaurant in Cedar Falls, and Waterloo is also privately held, but we can see the different lists. We can come up here. Chick-fil-A is a privately held company. They don't sell publicly. Staples, Hobby Lobby, which I already mentioned before, as a privately held or a close corporation. So these are going to be in your S Corp or close corporation space where they're not publicly traded and they're just really extremely large. Now, Hy-Vee has actually changed. Hy-Vee used to be a close corporation where only employees were allowed to own stock, and Hy-Vee is actually publicly traded now. They have gone public, and anyone can buy stock in Hy-Vee. So there have been some significant changes to Hy-Vee since this list was made. But you'll recognize some familiar corporations on this quick trip. Meijer Foods. The Meijer is a type of grocery store that you might see. Fairway is probably on this list. Fairway is a Midwest-based grocery store. Their corporate headquarters being in Boone. Okay. Casey's used to be on this list. Casey's is now also gone public, and you can buy stock in Casey's. Okay, where we talked about a lot of companies might start as S Corps or close corporations, and then decide to sell publicly on the stock market. Okay, and then this is an example. A lot of people also, when they think about corporations, they think about, each one of these brands usually as their own corporation, when the actual truth is that these brands on the outside here are all owned by these different corporations. So you can see when we look at every single brand here, we're only talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 corporations owning all of these brands. So this is usually where different brands have been purchased by corporations. So this is also very common. So like Dots Pretzels is one. Dots Pretzels started as a very small company in South Dakota. They were only available in South Dakota for a very long time. Then they kind of branched out to the Midwest, where you could find them in different Midwest stores. And then they were purchased by a corporation, and now you can find them everywhere you go, because the small little South Dakota company that started to make them sold to a large corporation. Okay, so we can look at PepsiCo. PepsiCo owns all of these brands. So whether you realized it or not, when you buy Doritos, you're buying Pepsi products. When you're buying Quaker Oats or Quaker cereal, you're buying Pepsi products. So all of these are actually under the same corporation. So it's just one corporation with a lot of different brands. Nestle. So you might recognize a lot of these. These are just close-up shots of the big graphic on the previous, so you can see all of the different areas where Nestle is in. Chocolate and actually bottled water are their two largest sales areas. So bottled water and different kinds of chocolate are where they make their most money. As you know, there is a Nestle factory here in Waterloo. The Nestle headquarters is overseas. P&G or Procter & Gamble. So Procter & Gamble does mostly home products and personal care products. Toothpaste, shampoo, conditioner, and then we see all these different cleaning products here. Procter & Gamble it has a lot of partnerships with different retailers such as Walmart. Okay, this is an example of Coca-Cola's different products. So where we look at the water, so Dasani water is a Coca-Cola product. Pepsi's water is Aquafina. So if you're buying Aquafina, that's actually Pepsi's water brand. But you can see that all of these then are Coke's products. And I have a couple more, and I'm just going to finish these out rather than, I really don't like to do videos over 15 minutes, but we're so close to being finished, I'm just going to keep going. Here's another example. This is a much smaller company. So Gap is the main parent company, is usually what they're called. So like Pepsi would be the parent company, Coca-Cola would be the parent company. In this case, Gap is the parent company, and then they own all of these brands. So Athleta, Banana Republic, Old Navy, and every single different Gap franchise. Okay, Nike. So Nike also owns Cole Haan, Umbro, Converse, and Hurley. So if you go out and buy Hurley products, you're also buying Nike products because Nike owns them. The same with Converse. That's just a Nike. It's a subsidiary. So what that happens is Nike owns the business and the money flows to Nike, but they operate each one of these as a separate entity. So Converse is its own business structure within Nike, Hurley is its own business and brand within Nike, etc. Okay, Adidas. Several years ago, Adidas bought Reebok. And so they now own Reebok. At one time, those were two separate shoe companies. So Adidas has all of their own brands, but then they also purchased Reebok and Rockport. Okay, and then this is an example of Unilever. So Unilever, you can see this is a very wide variety of products. Everything from cleaning supplies to food, to different, but you can see some of the most popular brands that you see here, that you're actually buying these from Unilever. And this is that they've bought out that company. Okay, beer, same thing. So I actually usually talk about like the AB, the Anheuser-Busch, AB InBev. I think 2 years ago, there was the Bud Light. And so Bud Light had a marketing campaign where they used a transgender model. And a lot of their customers were very upset with this campaign. And so that they said they were going to start boycotting the company. And when they started talking about boycotting Bud Light, they talked about the different brands that they were going to drink, such as, I'm going to drink Busch Light now, or I'm going to drink Corona now instead of drinking Bud Light. A lot of people don't realize when they're boycotting a company that that company also owns that same thing. So you say, oh, I'm not going to drink Bud Light anymore because I don't agree with their marketing products. I'm going to switch over to Corona. Well, what you didn't realize is that Anheuser-Busch, or the company that makes Busch Light, is also Bud Light, is also Corona, is also Shock Top. That's all the same beer company selling different brands under the same company. So if you really wanted to boycott Bud Light, you would have to boycott every single one of these brands listed here. Okay, so when you think about all of these different beers, and that it's really only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. It's only 5 companies that make all of the beers listed here. Okay, then you can see that they used to own Leinenkugels and Blue Moon, but they sold those off to Coors. And then they also sold the Miller Lite products, the Miller. These are all 4 Miller products, Milwaukee's Best. So Anheuser-Busch used to own those, and those had also been sold to Coors. So you can see some of that. And again, where some of these, Line and Kugel started as small independent and then was eventually bought by a large corporation. Okay, so that is the end of week 1, and I'm looking forward to getting into week 2 to talk about stockholders and shareholders.